When it comes to gardening or to farming, managing the Colorado potato beetle can be very easy or it can be very difficult. And a lot of it depends on the scale at which we are growing some of these crops. So what kinds of crops will the Colorado potato beetle affect? If you are having issues with the Colorado potato beetle, is it really the Colorado potato beetle or is it a different insect that looks very similar? Are there any natural predators that will go after the Colorado potato beetle? And what are some signs on the landscape that we can use to detect whether or not the Colorado potato beetle will be a problem in our area before they become a problem? Just so we can understand the terminology a little bit better, the Colorado potato beetle is a lot of words and letters. So we shorten that to an acronym called CPB. And there is another insect that goes after solanaceous crops that is very similar to the CPB, and that is the FPB, which the full name of that is the false Colorado potato beetle. And then, of course, when I say solanaceous crops, I am referring to plants in the nightshade family. Plants like potato, tobacco, pepper, tomato, tomatillo, all those. So the true CPB is very easy to distinguish from the FPB in its larval stage. The CPB larva will be reddish, brownish, orangish in color, whereas the FPB larva will be a whitish, gray kind of coloration to it. And these two beetles tend to prefer some different solanaceous crops. And I have it outlined pretty roughly right here, right? But just to give you a general idea of where my observations are right now so far, I have found the true CPB to be on the potato. That's really the main crop or even the main plant that I will find it on. Reportedly, it can also be on the tomato or the pepper, but I have never found the true CPB or the FPB on these two plants, the tomato or the pepper. When it comes to the eggplant or the Ethiopian eggplant, these are two closely related species. I will find the FPB on those two plants. And then with horse nettle, like Carolina horse nettle or the bittersweet nightshade, I will also find the FPB feeding on those plants. And definitely in the comments, if you see any other observations in your own garden or farm or whatever with what these two types of beetles will attack, definitely feel free to share that in the comments. So in terms of predators, what will go after the CPB or the FPB? So in certain areas of North America, the predatory stink bug, which comprises of specific species of stink bugs, right? Some of them are predatory, others are pests. But the predatory stink bug can go after some of these larvae, as will the lady beetle. We also have the fungus Beauveria bassiana, which is a fairly common IPM tool to help reduce the populations of certain pest insects. And then same thing with certain strains of the Bacillus thuringiensis, especially the variety Tenebrianus. And that is a bacteria, right? If you've ever heard of BT, that's what it is, right? It's a bacteria that produces a toxin that will be toxic to these insects, especially at certain stages of growth, like as larvae, and it can ultimately kill some of these pest insects like the CPB or the FPB. Then of course, as I've mentioned in other videos as well, for other insect pests, we have parasitic nematodes, right? And these are certain species of nematodes that are very beneficial. They live in the soil, so they can go after certain insects or certain larvae that may be overwintering. So like later in the summer especially, or earlier in the spring, these parasitic nematodes can actually be a very effective control tool for a lot of insect pests, including the Colorado potato beetle as well. And so two notable categories of these nematodes would be the Steinernema and then the Heterohabitus. Additionally, tachinid flies, which are beneficial predatory flies. Some of those fly species even almost look very similar to like a normal housefly. And then we also have some spiders that can go after the CPB, as well as amphibians, like certain species of frogs or toads, that kind of thing. Additionally, birds have also been reported as predators, and then there's also some research being done on a particular type of parasitic wasp known as Adovum petlerae. And this parasitic wasp will actually go after the CPB as well. Down here at the bottom, I also have humans, because sometimes we have to intervene if we want to be able to save a crop, right? And so intervention could mean introducing some of these species, right? Especially like some of the parasitic nematodes, fungus, or the bacteria of BT. And so those can be at least relatively effective control measures that we can take. Now, of course, if you are a backyard gardener, control methods will be very easy for the Colorado potato beetle. It's a super easy pest to control at a small scale. It's when we scale up that things become a little bit more complicated. I found that the water in the jar method, just manually removing those Colorado potato beetles, or even the FPB as well, is a very effective, very easy, very simple control measure to take, at least for, you know, the amount of solanaceous crops that I'm growing. Extremely easy to keep up with. But again, if you're growing acres of potatoes, that's a totally different story. And oftentimes, especially for my experience, it seems like I have to intervene at least on some level for the CPB or the FPB. I'm not sure if these beetles, if they bioaccumulate certain toxins from some of these solanaceous crops, like certain alkaloids like solanine, or the other one, it starts with a CH, and if that makes them distasteful or poisonous to a lot of these would-be predators. Also, oftentimes during the daytime, the larvae of these beetles will hide on the underside of leaves, right? And so they won't be as easily seen or noticed by some of these predators. But also, I haven't been a part of a perfectly balanced ecosystem. So with just me thinking here, it's totally possible that, you know, if we had a really balanced ecosystem, we might not have to intervene on this at all. But, you know, there's a lot more experimentation, a lot more research to be done on that before we can get like a really solidified conclusion. All right, so now what kinds of signs can we look for on the landscape that will clue us in to whether or not the CPB or the FPB will be a challenge? So of course, the CPB and the FPB can have between 1 and I think 3 generations per year or so. It will depend on your climate, your length of your growing season, and all those different factors. But usually what we have to do is we have to use this tool called scouting. And so basically what scouting is that we are going outside into the farm field or into the garden, and we are inspecting plants. And it's always good to make sure that we are doing that at least on a weekly basis and making observations. Anything that looks out of the ordinary, anything that looks like it might be a concern, we want to make note of that, make sure that we can identify what that problem is, and work to find a solution, maybe even a preventative solution if possible. So we are looking at the orange egg masses, especially on the undersides of the leaves, and we are going to be looking specifically on solanaceous crops like these plants that I outlined here, you know, the potato eggplant, bittersweet nightshade, all those different plants. And so those orange egg masses can just be manually removed. Also at this stage, certain beneficial predators may also go after the egg stage of these beetles as well. In the summertime, as I briefly noted before, these beetles will also hide on the underside of some of these solanaceous leaves. It protects them from the sun, and it also protects them from some predators to some extent as well. Then in the late evening and during the night, these insects will actually emerge and come on top of the leaf surface. So that's a really good time to go out into the field and observe, right, if these insects are really a problem. You know, if you just take a glance during the day, you know, you might be deceived. But during that late evening, nighttime, that's when you're really going to see how many beetle larvae there actually are. And it can also be a good time to pick them off easily, right? You don't have to go hunting for them. And then I also want to add one other note. When I do any type of like manual control. That's really my main intervention for personally for my size garden and stuff for these beetles. Whenever I pick these beetles off manually, I never take all of them off. I always try to leave some there for the beneficial insects and some of the other predators that may go after these beetles, right? Just so that I can continue to at least have some sort of baseline that can help to provide for the needs of these beneficial predators. And I find that if I pick off most of them, not all of them, there usually seems to be a pretty minimal, low grade amount of damage on the crops that I am growing. And I can totally live with that. Additionally, down in the show notes, I have attached a scientific article on the CPB, and it specifically discusses how when the CPB starts consuming the foliage of some of these solanaceous crops, like the potato, for example, there is a microbe, like a bacteria in that insect's saliva that actually can get into the plant and affect it systemically, right? So that means not just in the local area of the bite, but it can actually spread throughout the plant, the whole plant. And it actually works to suppress the plant's immune system. So the plant can't as easily manufacture some of these compounds that might otherwise make that plant more distasteful or maybe even somewhat toxic to the beetle. Because in normal circumstances, insect browse will actually trigger a immune response in the plant, but the saliva from the CPB can actually suppress that immune response, so it can actually make the plants more susceptible to the Colorado potato beetle. Alright, so thank you so much for checking out this video on the Colorado potato beetle and the false Colorado potato beetle. We know some predators on the landscape that can go after these insects, along with a few other natural control methods that we can use. And we have identified some signs on the landscape that can tell us ahead of time whether or not the Colorado potato beetle will be a problem. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Take care.